Hi folks, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, and we are here once again for a Sunday session. This week's topic is going to be seeking money partners and all the issues and challenges that sit in and around that, both from a legal sense and also from a, ethical, moral sense, and physically how you actually go and obtain that. So nice big topic. Anticipate plenty of questions in that regard. I can see a few people coming on. I can see Shelley and Margaret already on and a couple of others joining as well. So welcome everybody. Before we get too far into, the session itself, thought I'd do a little bit of housekeeping side of things. So some housekeeping elements. You'll notice that we've actually put some banners up. Figured it would be one of those things where it was about time that we did a little bit of self-promoting. So Property Developer Network and RenoSave are our two brands that we have two different communities that sit in and around those. The RenoSave community is a relatively recent acquisition. We've actually taken over somebody else's group, and I'm pleased to say that this evening we will be relaunching RenoSave, having cut over to a brand new website, putting a whole bunch of new features and benefits into that program. And being able to negotiate a whole bunch of new discounts with a whole bunch of new suppliers. So anyone who is a Property Developer Network annual member automatically is a RenoSave member. But you can actually buy RenoSave all by itself, which is good and fantastic. That said, RenoSave is going to be, having a stand at the upcoming Renovation Home Show here in Brisbane. So if anyone would like some free tickets to that, we've been able to negotiate 500 free tickets into the Renovation Home Show at the RNA Showgrounds. That's next weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So if you would like to do that, I'm just going to type in here how to obtain those, and it's, if I could type. renosave.info/free ticks. So if anyone would like that, that's where you go to get some free tickets. Otherwise, getting into the show is around about $17, something along those lines. We've managed to negotiate 500 for free, and if we exceed that 500, then we get 50% discount on any ticket after that. So we are actually going to be relaunching that RenoSave brand, and so you're going to see a whole bunch of discounts that we're going to be promoting if you want to become just a RenoSave member. So really hard to do that backwards. So there you go. Yes, so that said, I can see a few more people come on board. So Belinda, Dave, Michael, Alex, Christy, and Tony. So welcome all folks. We're going to be talking about today's session, which is seeking money partners. Still doing a little bit of housekeeping first of all. So we've got some upcoming events in the next month that are worthy of everybody knowing what they are and where they are. So firstly, we are doing a new intake to our property development formula program. And so if there is anyone interested in finding out anything about that, that's a 12-month education program that will teach you how to become a property developer, some very, subtle nuances that sit in and around that. And the stuff that we talk about here on these Sunday sessions, we go into a lot more detail in and around all of that. So anyone wanting to know about that, we're actually running a free information session before each of our meetups in the next month. So Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. So in the morning, we'll be running the info session, and in the afternoon, we'll be running the normal meetup. So in Sydney, the date will be the 27th of July. In Melbourne, the date will be the 3rd of August. And in Brisbane, it will be the 17th of August. So those are the info sessions on how to start in property development and our property development formula program. So anyone wanting to do that, feel free to come to those sessions. They are for free. Maybe I'll get Shelley to post. I can see that she's online. I might get Shelley to post that link on there to save me typing and pausing. On top of that, we also run a 2-day mindset course for anyone actually wanting to know some of the issues and challenges and how to overcome them in regards to the property development process. So one of the biggest obstacles that we find is that thing that sits between your two ears, being your mind. That tends to slow us down a heck of a lot. So limiting beliefs, I can't find a deal, haven't got enough money, all those sorts of things. We break those down and we, I guess, pull them apart and we repack them and put them back in. It's a very, very feature-packed session. We're going to be running that in Melbourne and Sydney. So 2-day event in Melbourne and Sydney. No Brisbane session this time. And the reason for that is we have run that in Brisbane multiple times already, and most of our Brisbane crew have already been to it. And so what we're doing is anyone in Brisbane who wants to go to that will fly down to Sydney or Melbourne. And anyone in Sydney or Melbourne who wants to come to our property development formula will come to us. And so then it's a fair, even slog all the way around. So a few more people jumping on board. So I can see Richard Hodges, Michael as well. And thank you, Shelley, for those links. That's greatly appreciated. Those sessions for, the Mindset event, we call that the Psychology of Property Development. In Melbourne, that will be the 7th to 8th of September, and that will actually replace the monthly meetup there. And in Sydney, that's going to be the 24th to 25th of August. And again, that's going to replace that monthly meetup there. So anyone interested in those folks, feel free to click on the links and join us. Okay, so today's session, seeking money partners. I'm surprised that we've only got a number of people this small, to be honest, because everyone seems to be wanting money partners. So it's one of those things where no matter how you're starting, whether you've got no money at all, where you've got very limited resources, or even if you've got a lot of money, someone like myself who's doing quite well, having more money partners means you can actually go into more deals. And so there's a number of different ways that you can seek money partners. There's a number of different ways that you can engage with money partners. And equally, there's a number of challenges that you've got to dance around with regards to, I guess, legal, legislative obligations and the like. Just a little bit parched, so let me take a sip. Nice honey spiced bourbon this time round. I know everyone has a go at me for having a different drink every single time. So honey spiced bourbon, folks. So seeking money partners. The biggest question in the process is how and where do I find money partners? And what most people very much underestimate is the power of this thing here. This is your phone. This is your the phone book. These are the people who have known you for years and years. They know who you are. They know what you're about. They know what your integrity level is. They understand how you deal with issues and challenges. And even though you're new to property development, they know whether or not when you're going to have obstacles in the way, which is inevitable, how you're actually going to be able to deal with that. So the problem is that most of us are actually afraid to pick up the phone and actually place a call to someone. So now it's always a challenge if you just physically pick up the phone and say, hey, can I have some money? So my guidance would be to not do it in that way, but instead, through a whole series of serendipity type conversations, just put feelers out there like little fish hooks and talk to people when you go to work. Talk to them over the water cooler. When you're at a friend's barbecue, talk to them at the barbecue. And when they say, hey, what did you do over the weekend? Don't tell them, oh, nothing. Let them know, hey, I was looking at deals. Hey, I'm very close to finding my first project. And what you'll find is that some people will disengage, which is natural, in which case you don't push the topic any further. And other people will actually lean in and say, tell me a little bit about that. That sounds really interesting, really exciting. And they're the kinds of people who are likely going to be the long-term people who end up being your money partners. Now, what I see conversely to that is a number of people turn up to meetup events similar to mine, and there are many others out there, and they expect that turning up to a meetup event is where they're going to find money partners. And the problem there is that the people that you're meeting are complete strangers, and they don't know anything about who you are. They don't know anything about how you deal with issues and challenges. And so the sell that you're trying to get these people to is trying to sell them on a project that you've got, but they don't even know who you are and whether or not they should trust you. So I guess they're the subtle differences in who I would be approaching and how. There are other, I guess, places that you can go with regards to seeking money partners. So one of them is our development site Deal Hub. So you can actually promote on there the fact that you are looking for money partners. Now, everybody in that community is expecting someone to be asking about money partners, and so it's not a difficult conversation in there. What I would highly encourage you to do is don't go in and just ask for money. Make sure that you've put together what is called an information memorandum or an IM that talks all about your project. What are what the project's about, how long it's going to take, what your exit strategies are, what you think your profit margins are going to be, what's the demographic for the finished product, who do you think the competitors are. Put all of that together in an information memorandum, and then when somebody is seeking out your money partners, then you can actually talk about the project in and of its own right. In that process, I would also be making sure that you're asking the money partner for what it is that you are seeking, how long you're seeking it for, what sort of security that you're actually going to be offering, and how they're going to be able to get their money back, and at what timeline they're going to get that money back. So they're the sorts of things that you would put together in an information memorandum. Now, with regards to those sorts of things, you have to be extraordinarily careful to not use the word guarantee, okay? So nobody can guarantee that a project is going to go perfectly well. It's impossible. Things can and do go wrong. And it's actually against ASIC legislation to say that you are going to guarantee a return. Unless you are a licensed financial advisor, which I'm going to say that the majority of you are not, you can't make those sorts of promises. Now, whilst you may be willing to put personal guarantees against things, and you may have cash reserves somewhere else, you may be able to do that as a personal guarantee, but you cannot do that as a guaranteed return. And so that personal guarantee then is going to be a document that then is going to define how and where that person's going to seek that money outside of the deal in itself. Now, in going into the deal, the offer for a rate of return that you're going to be offering people can vary significantly based on how much you're borrowing, the risk of the deal itself, how long the money is out for, whether or not you've done it before, and what sort of security you're offering. So it's a very, very broad range of what can be offered and the sorts of returns that they would be expecting. Now, to put some context around some of this, the range is going to be anywhere between 8% per annum all the way up to 30% per annum. So that's a very, very wide range in what you could and would be offering someone in return for being an investor in your project. Equally, you could also offer them a profit split in the deal. So there's a couple of different ways that you could be doing that. So I can see a comment here from Andrew. Great stuff, Rob. So thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. I guess whilst I've got that break, would highly encourage anyone with any questions at all to ask them here. There's always a little bit of a lag between you typing the question and me seeing the question. So I guess make sure that you ask those questions. We typically go for about 45 minutes on these sessions. So by the time you hear me say something, that's going to give you plenty of questions to write down. And I will do my best to respond to them live. That's the intention of these Sunday sessions. So with regards to legislation, so I did mention guarantees and the fact that that is a little bit of a challenge. You have to be extraordinarily careful in how and where you go seeking money from people who you don't know. The challenge is that ASIC, the Australian Securities Investment Commission, I should say. ASIC has some very strict guidelines on what you can and can't do with regards to advertising to try and seek money partners and investors. They have a thing called, some terminology called sophisticated and unsophisticated investors. So I'm not going to be quoting the actual numbers here, but a sophisticated investor could be in and around the $250,000 a year income and or $2 million worth of savings. Now, I could be slightly wrong with those numbers there, but that is a sophisticated investor. So a sophisticated investor, you can approach and you can get those people involved in your projects by putting, I guess, going out publicly to those people specifically. But if you're going out to unsophisticated investors, you have to be extraordinarily careful in who you approach, how you approach them, and also what you say to them in that regard. Now, I am certainly not a lawyer, and this is not my greatest area of expertise, but I can give you some guidelines to try and talk to your solicitor on. And that is the fact that if you are publicly advertising anywhere and going out to people who you A, don't know, and B, have no relationship with in any way, shape or form, then it is deemed to be, I guess, effectively racketeering, and that you're trying to engage investors that and on promises that may or may not actually exist. And so you have to be very careful in that triggering the ASIC regulation side of things. That said, there is a thing called a 20-12-2 rule. So no more than 20 investors with no more than $2 million worth of funds in any 12 months. So those three things together, 20-12-2, would apply if you are trying to seek investors into your project. And that is for any one individual director that is within the project. So if you go into a second deal inside that 12 months and you are director of the second deal, then the 20-12-2 element still applies because you're inside the 12-month period. And you can only keep to a maximum of 20 people and $2 million that you actually raise. Now, it's not 20 people that are investing with you, it's 20 people that you approach, and that's a very distinctly different thing. So if you're putting mass email out to a whole bunch of people, or you're putting posts in unknown and unqualified Facebook groups where people are not expecting that, then that can actually be a world of pain. One of the reasons why we don't allow that in our property developer network group is because a lot of the people in there are unsuspecting and it's deemed to be unsolicited. Whereas if you go into development site Deal Hub, people are going in there knowing the fact that that they could be propositioned, and so they are, I guess, have been pre-qualified from that regard. So you can say that anyone in that community is looking for and seeking those sorts of investments. And whilst that is not a legal disclaimer, it is certainly I guess, a much better approach than going to complete unknown strangers and giving them unsolicited offers. So Michael's got a question. Hi, Rob. Can you please explain the different types of security? What is the least risky, and what would you feel comfortable with when assessing a deal for a money partner? So that's a great question, Michael. That's really going to come down to, there are, I'm going to say, 4 different types of security. There's a first mortgage, there's a second mortgage, there's a caveat, there's a personal guarantee, and then the 5th one is unsecured. So they're really the 5 different ways that you can actually seek funds from people, depending upon, I guess, how you're able to offer that and what the deal is actually for. You may not be able to offer first mortgage because you may actually have a bank involved, and so the bank is going to have first mortgage. So then you would then say, well, can I offer second mortgage? If you can't offer second mortgage because you've got another bank involved, or alternatively, if the first bank won't allow a second mortgage, then you then have to move down the food chain. So hopefully that helps in that regard. The difference between a mortgage and a caveat from a security perspective, and I get this question a lot. A mortgage allows you the ability to call in the loan and sell the underlying asset that sits underneath. So your bank, who owns first mortgage, if you don't pay the debts, they can actually sell the property on your behalf, and they get first grab at any cash that comes through because they have first mortgage. Now, the second mortgagee then gets the second chance to have a grab. So they're always a little bit less secure than the first person. So the first person always gets paid. So if the first person is calling in the loan, the only amount of sale that they are caring about is enough to secure their loan. So whether or not they seek a bargain basement price for the property or not, they may cut out the second mortgagee or anyone with a caveat down the food chain, because all they cared about is the fact that they got enough money for their own debt. So you need to be very careful that if there is another mortgagee involved and the project goes south, who is actually in control of that. So hence why second mortgage is, I guess, a little bit less secure than a first mortgage. Second mortgagee can still call the debt in if they have not been repaid, but they must pay the first mortgagee back first. So it really comes down to who is calling the loan in and under what circumstances as to who's going to control that sales process, and whether or not they're going to try and recoup enough money to recapture the entire project. Deborah, so I'll continue on, and I can see some questions there from Deborah, so I'll come back to that. So then after a mortgage is then a caveat. So a mortgage, if you've got a mortgage, you can sell the property. If you've got a caveat, you can't sell the property. But what you can do is you can have a caveat lodged against the property, so that if at any point in the future somebody goes to sell the property, then they cannot physically settle on that without first engaging with you, finding out what the dispute is, and then resolving that dispute before the sale actually occurs. So the challenge there is that if somebody sits on a property for 20 years, you may have your money trapped in that for 20 years. When they eventually sell it, then that caveat will then come and apply. Now, you have to be very careful, because there are, I guess, short-term caveats and long-term caveats. And if you just lodge a normal everyday caveat through your solicitor, then chances are it's going to expire in 3 months' time. So you need something that is a little bit more substantial and is going to be sitting on that property for as long as it takes. Equally, you need to have something drawn up in the documents to say that once that resolution has been made, that you withdraw that caveat, so that once your funds have been repaid, so that they can sell that property clear and free. So that said, I can see a question here from Deborah. Deborah says, you mentioned providing security earlier. What forms can this take, and does it differ from what a bank, etc., would require? So Deborah, that's pretty much the same as what Michael was asking. So first mortgage, second mortgage, caveat, unsecured, personal guarantee, and unsecured. So it's really those five, and I guess your interest would vary across that. And the bank can do pretty much all of those, and most instances the bank will do first mortgage, and personal guarantee is really their preferred modus operandi. If it's a second tier lender coming in and you've already got a primary bank, they may come in as a second mortgage and also a personal guarantee. So they generally combine multiple securities. I then see Dean's joined. Deborah then says, sorry, somebody's already asked that question. So yes, sorry, I didn't see that you had said that somebody had asked that. So apologies for that. Barb's also joined, Carol's joined, and Deb says time lag. No problems at all, Deb, completely understand. I have that issue as well. From a personal guarantee perspective, you've got to have a look at what your asset protection mechanisms are. If you're offering a personal guarantee to anyone in any of your loans, that means that irrespective of that particular project, that they can come and sue you through a civil type matter and try and take assets that may not have necessarily been named in the original loan documents, but they can see what other assets you actually own and get the court to try and adjudicate on the sale of those assets. So be very careful. Personal guarantee will allow you to pursue that, but it is going to take some legal action to try and pursue that, which is why it is less secure than, I guess, the first and second mortgage. Annie says, in a dispute, can the senior mortgagee sell the property if you have a caveat on it? So the answer is they can't sell it without resolving the dispute, Annie. So they must come to you and actually work out what that dispute is. They will have first mortgagee rights, and so no matter what the dispute is, you will be coming to terms with them to say, well, they are going to get the money first. But what you will say was, don't sell it at a fire sale, because I don't want you to sell it at a fire sale. I need you to sell it at market rate. Otherwise, I'm not going to release that. So it allows you to negotiate with the first mortgagee and or the second mortgagee to make sure that they are not just going to be selling at a fire sale. That's probably the best outcome that you can have if you are further down the food chain like that. I can also see Cam's joined us and Mark's joined us, so welcome, guys. We're a little way into the presentation itself, so plenty of time to go back and rewind on everything you've missed so far. Now, when it comes down to you've found a money partner and you've offered them a rate of some description, how you engage in that can take multiple forms. So you can do that as a loan, or you could also do that as in a joint venture type arrangement. And with either of those options, you can do an interest rate and or a profit split capacity. The subtle differences between them is in a loan, once you have the money, so long as you meet the conditions that were articulated within the loan, then how you spend that money is really at the discretion of the developer, and he can spend that within the deal itself, I guess, however he sees fit. If it comes to a joint venture, though, then it gets a little bit more tricky, because typically you're going to have a money partner and a time partner in a joint venture document. You're going to have a document that says roles and responsibilities, and generally the time partner needs to report into the money partner on a regular basis as to how and where the funds are being spent. And so from that regard, you have a little bit more justification as to what you're doing within the process, which can slow you down a little bit, but at the same time is very worth it. The people that are likely to be investing in you in a joint venture money partner arrangement are likely to be people who are wanting to learn the process themselves. And so they're giving you money in good faith, knowing that they're going to learn something from it, as well as get a financial reward from that. So that's the to and fro that happens between those two. From a loan perspective, it is quite simple. The loan must be legally between two corporate entities. It cannot be a personal loan between a human and yourself. It needs to be between one company and another company, or one trust and another trust. They must be corporate entities of some way, shape, or form with either an ABN or an ACN. Now, that can include self-managed super funds. They can also lend into the process, so long as it is a corporate entity of some description. I can see a question. Mark says, thanks, will do, no problems. Annie says, personal/director guarantee, can it be set to limited to the project amount or amount, e.g. 5 mil, i.e. a limited guarantee? So the answer is that you can negotiate anything, Annie, but it's whether or not the other person is willing to accept that. Now, the personal guarantee is generally going to be for return of the original investment, plus whatever interest you had promised, plus whatever penalties may apply because you didn't apply it. So you are effectively going to be limiting it by the loan documents and or joint venture documents that you've disclosed that are going to be declaring how and when those funds are returned and what rate that those funds are returned at. So highly recommend that if you're going to be investing with someone else, or if you're going to be having investors invest with you, that you make sure that you've got everything captured in a legally binding document. It's not on a handshake. It's not on a, hey, we're good mates forever. None of that. It needs to be legally binding, because nobody ever intends for projects to go south, but they can and do occur from time to time. And so it's really important that everybody understands, should that happen, what are the roles and responsibilities? What should happen if the money partner who lends you the money, halfway through the project, maybe they lose their job? You know, what is the recourse in that if they come to you and say, hey, I need my money back? And you say, well, I'm sorry, I'm halfway through a project. Morally, you want to try and help them, but legally, have you done anything to try and capture that in the process? Can see a couple of other comments. So Brad has also joined us, and Michael says, can a self-managed super fund lend funds to a deal with a formal secured loan agreement if property is within investment rules of the self-managed super fund? So the answer is yes, Michael, and you've touched on the most important part. So the rules that you define within your self-managed super funds will tell you what you can and can't invest in. So long as you've actually defined that within your fund deed, I think that's the right terminology. That will actually tell you what you're actually allowed to invest in. Now, there are some challenges here just to be aware of. Anyone within a self-managed super fund cannot borrow money to develop. You can lend money, but you can't borrow money. So really important to understand that. So you can lend money into somebody else's self-managed super fund, absolutely. If you are lending money into a self-managed super fund, from a self-managed super fund into a development entity, you cannot have more than a 49% controlling interest, or not controlling interest, 49% interest in that project. So you, the human, can't do that. The challenge there is you might have some cash in your personal name and some cash in your self-managed super fund, and you want to be a money partner into someone else's deal, and you might want to go 50-50 as a money partner. Well, unfortunately, because the self-managed super fund is involved, you can't go any more than 49%. That's to try and stop you lending money to yourself in the process, which is something that I guess the ASIC is very on top of. So make sure that you don't do that. What you can do, however, is if you've got some money in your self-managed super fund and someone else has money in their self-managed super fund, you have a project, they have a project, what you could do is you could invest $200,000 into their project from your self-managed super fund, and their self-managed super fund can invest $200,000 into your project. Now, neither of you have a controlling interest in the other person's project, and so long as the terms written within those loans are 100% identical with regards to the rates on offer, the exit strategies, all those sorts of things, you've effectively washed your funds out and allowed that same money to come into your own project. But one set of money has gone that way and the other set of money has gone that way, and effectively you've washed that out. So then you would have to pay them back the return, they'd have to pay you back the return, but in the meantime you've been able to spend that any way that you like in the process. So hopefully that helps there. Annie says, good answer, thanks Rob. You're welcome, Annie, no problem at all. Trying to think what other items I was going to try and cover here. So good time to ask questions, to say who's got any specific questions. More than happy to try and answer them as we go here. So remembering there is a slight lag between me, you writing it and me receiving it. So whilst I do that and take a pause, I'm just going to take a sip. Now I touched on the on ASIC regulation, and you've also heard of APRA, so the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority. Between those two entities, they are pretty much controlling how and where money can be borrowed and from where it can be borrowed under different sets of legislation. So you need to make sure that you, before you go and borrow money off of anybody, that you go and talk to your solicitor about how and where you may be triggering either or both of those sets of legislation. What I would say is that if you're trying to seek funds from more than one person, then chances are that you're likely going to be triggering the ASIC regulation. So you want to make sure that if you're either breaching that 2012-2 rule or if you're not 100% sure as to the loan documents that you've got together, make sure you talk to your solicitor to get that anointed. Alternatively, what you could do is go to sorry, I'm about to cough. Excuse me 2 seconds, I'll just mute. And I'm back. What you could do is go to someone who's got an AFSL license, so Australian Financial Services license, and they are able to seek multiple investors from, I guess, small amounts of money, accumulate those together and put them together into I guess, a investment package, and that investment package can then invest in you. What that allows is one person might have 50,000, another person might have 100,000. If you might need 5 or 6 investors going down that sort of approach, now each one of them is going to want security, but it's impossible for you to offer first mortgage security to all of them because there's too many of them. So what you would instead do is go to someone who offers one of these services. They would collect and collate the number of people that invest, go through their AFSL licensed program. They would make sure that they bundle that up, and they would lend you one amount of money, and that one amount of money would then be secured instead. Okay. So that's, I guess, the most common way. Now, generally, the people who aggregate those sorts of things do charge a little bit of a management fee over the top. So whatever rate that you would like to pay, they're going to charge typically anywhere between 1% and 3% on top of, I guess, the funds offered to the investor for the privilege of doing that. The other way that other people do try to invest is putting together what is called a syndicate. So a syndicate allows you to, I guess, collect those small amounts of people. And as I said before, when you're trying to syndicate funds, the challenge there is that you need to come under that 2012-2 rule. So you've probably heard of syndications before, but you can do that in a number of different ways with are they small investors? Or maybe you say, well, if I'm doing a 6-pack townhouse project, then I need 6 investors. Each person is going to buy 1 unit. And so that is effectively deemed to be a pre-sale. So they're really just paying forward the money that they would be purchasing that product on early in the piece to allow you to actually go through the process. So multiple different ways of sorting that out, but make sure that if you're trying to syndicate in any way, shape or form, or trying to accumulate more than one investor, that you go and make sure that you haven't triggered those 2012-2 rules. Now, I can see a few other questions. So Jason's joined, so welcome, Jason. Annie says, can I lend money under my personal name to the development project? That is an absolute 100% categorical no. You cannot do that, Annie. It must be a corporate loan from a corporate entity to another corporate entity. Otherwise, it triggers APRA regulations because you're breaching the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority's legislation on what can actually be deemed a loan. But as a company, companies are exempt from that. So if you do a company-to-company loan, then yes, that is actually allowed. But if you're doing it in personal names, no, that is not allowed. Michael says, have you ever used a builder in a profit share situation where you put in time and money and the builder put in builder's license, built it and put up funds also? So I haven't personally, Michael. I've certainly engaged in those types of conversations multiple times, but to date, for one reason or another, haven't been able to negotiate that through to completion. But it is certainly something that is very worthwhile to consider in the process. You need to be mindful of the fact that any builder, 1 in 5 of them actually go broke. And so if you're going to go as a money partner into a deal like that, you need to be very, very comfortable that they are financially secure and able to actually complete that project, because it's going to get very, 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 very messy should they go broke for no, it might be a reason completely outside of the project altogether, but it could potentially take you down. So if you're going to do that, and it's a valid strategy, and many people do it, but if you're going to do that, make sure that you've financially checked out their capacity and their cash flow situation. You've done reference checks on them, but you've also checked their appropriate building license to see what marks there may be against it and the like. George has also joined us, so welcome, George. Christy says, do you normally put the funds from the money partner into a separate joint bank account so that the known funds for the project is available, or do you just send all the invoices for the project and the money partner to pay the bills from their account? So, Chrissy, 2 different ways of doing that. If it's a loan, then typically they would put money into a trust account in either their solicitor or your solicitor, and the loan document would actually define what allows you to draw down from that trust account. And the solicitor would be the one actually managing that process to make sure that it's been, I guess, appropriately looked after. Alternatively, if it's a joint venture money partner arrangement, then yes, it could go into a joint account. A couple of different ways that can actually be done. I've done multiple variations of this. It could be a two-signatory type approach where hypothetically, I might load up the invoice ready for payment, and I sign it off from my side. Then they need to log into the banking platform. They also need to approve that, and then the money leaves. That's one way. Alternatively, it could actually be in a separate bank account that you've got rights to, but they've got additional logins to. You have to be very careful when you're doing things like that, the other partner, one, has a lot of trust, and two, doesn't have the ability to actually take the funds out and cripple the project. You don't want them to cripple the project, and equally they don't want you to cripple the project by taking the money out. So you need to be very careful in that regard, but typically it's done with a dual signatory type arrangement in sending the funds out. Jobin has just joined, so has Tony and Baz as well. So welcome, folks. We are quite late into the process, so you may need to rewind to get all the juicy bits out of this one. Okay, folks, coming up to the 40-minute mark, so that's pretty much the content that I had. So it's really over to you guys to see what questions you've got. I'll give you a minute or so for some questions to come in. Baz says, hi from the US of A, mate. Different time zone over there, so quite impressed. I'm not sure if you've just going to bed or just gotten up, but welcome, mate, and appreciate all your help and assistance in running our Melbourne meetup. So thank you very much. Is it business or pleasure? Would be the question, Baz. So okay, so Jen has just joined and Wayne has also just joined. So folks, you're joining right at the very end, so I would encourage you to rewind this and watch from the beginning. I'm just about to wrap up, and I'm just asked after some final questions to come through. While those final questions are coming through, I will just do a little bit of housekeeping just to remind everybody that over the next month, we are going to be doing some information sessions talking about our upcoming intake from our Property Development Formula program. Those information sessions are going to be held in the morning at each of our meetups in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. So you can come to the afternoon meetup as per normal, or you can come to the morning, hear about our program, and then stay on for the afternoon if you think that is of interest at all. So in Sydney, that is going to be the 27th of July. In Melbourne, that is going to be the 3rd of August. And in Brisbane, that's going to be the 17th of August. So anyone interested in those information sessions, there are some links that Shelley put in further up. So please go up and actually have a look at that. So that 12-month program, the Property Development Formula, is, I guess, our signature showpiece program that we run. And I guess we're quite proud of the outcomes and achievements that our guys are actually achieving out of that. We also have, separate to that, a 2-day event called The Psychology of Property Development, which is all about the mindset to make sure that you're actually going to get on course and stay on course for the duration of the project. And we actually include that as part of our Property Development Formula program, but you can actually do that separately. So that is going to be done in replacement of one of the meetups in Sydney, and also in replacement for one of the meetups in Melbourne. So the 7th and 8th of September in Melbourne will be the Psychology of Property Development, and the 24th and 25th of August in Sydney, for anyone interested in doing those two programs. Questions finally come through. So Michael says, can you go into checking out a builder prior to lending them funds for a project? When you say lending the builder funds, are you, I'm just mindful of the question that was asked earlier. I'm not sure if it's related to them joining ventures with you or vice versa. But to answer the question, yes, every building licensing board across Australia has an online portal that actually allows you to check the builder's license out, and you can actually see what blemishes they've actually got against them, how those blemishes were actually resolved, and if they were resolved, what their financial capacity is, what their license is for. So are they licensed for 2 stories? Are they licensed for 5 stories, for example? And quite often they've got a financial constraint, so maybe they can only do no more than $10 million worth of projects at a time. So one of your questions would be, how many projects have you got on right now? Those sorts of things. So the answer is yes, you can check that out, and I highly recommend that you do that. So Christy says, thanks, Rob. You're more than welcome, Christy. And then Michael says, to make sure they are in a decent financial position to complete the build. So that's further to your previous question. The answer is you physically can't find out from the building licensing board if they're in a good financial position. The building licensing board generally have a process where once a year they will do an audit on each builder. So depending upon how recently that audit was done, you could just use the licensing board's effort to that effect. But I would actually be asking the builder for copies of their financial statements, so you can actually see that money is going in and going out in an appropriate fashion, and they've actually got some buffers there. So hopefully that helps in that regard. And Greg has just joined right on sign-off time, mate. So you're last on the bell, mate. So please rewind and you can see all of that again. So folks, as there are no further questions coming in, I'm going to call that a day. Thank you very much. If you are interested in RenoSave coming to the Renovation Home Show in Brisbane, we will be running a stand there, and we are giving away 500 free tickets to that Reno show. If anyone is interested at all in that, there is a link further up in this post right at the very, very start in order to claim that. So please do that if you're based in Brisbane. That's for next weekend. Other than that, announcing that we are just about to relaunch our RenoSave website, and we've got a whole bunch of new deals. We will be running some specials for memberships on that as well. If anyone would like to do RenoSave, if you are an annual member of Property Developer Network, then you automatically get membership into RenoSave. I guess the fact that we're running both communities, we I guess have got that reciprocal arrangement with ourselves to try and give you the maximum benefit that you can. But RenoSave has well over 1,000 different discounts through close to 40 odd suppliers in tiling, electrical, flooring, appliances, paint, Bunnings. There's a whole bunch. So if nothing else, the membership in that is worthwhile just for any discount that you're going to get on whatever your next job is. So that said, and he's got one last question before I sign off. For someone to lend you money from their self-managed super fund, do you need to be licensed? That depends on how you're doing that, Annie. I'm going to say you really need to talk to your solicitor in that regard. I'm going to say if it's a business-to-business loan, then the answer is no. So if it's from one corporate entity to another corporate entity, the answer is no. So self-managed super fund counts as a corporate entity. So long as they're lending to you in a corporate entity name, then you should be fine. So Mark Baker has joined. Sorry, mate, we're just signing off. And Carol says the link doesn't work. RenoSave. Let me say that again. info/free ticks. Hopefully that works now, Carol. I'm just going to check it out myself and see if it does actually go through. No, it does not. Okay, stay tuned and I will fix that one lickety-split. So that is the link, but it's clearly down at the moment. I will get onto that as soon as I sign off from this chat. Thank you, folks. It's been great, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.